Because of this, the woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the messengers. Okay, in other words, in verse 10, this is one of those things that comes in, this is why I said we're stirring the pot up here, because a lot of ladies out there have big ministries about your head has to have a head covering on it, a physical covering. And it says, because of the angels and the messengers. Let's go back to the first thing we were talking about as far as verse 2 when it talked about traditions and Torah. Is there a Torah command saying the ladies have to put anything on their head? No. Is Paul allowed to create Torah? No. All right, that settles the issue, doesn't it? So he's not saying that he's making new Torah here. So if he's not saying that, then what could he be saying? He says, look, it says because of the messengers. Now, there are a couple of possibilities of what he's talking about here, because remember, we are now a good 2,000 years after he wrote it. So what is it that he's talking about? Well, he's talking about possibly by messengers, meaning those that are emissaries of Messiah, like the apostles that would be traveling around, who would need to see, by example, that these are ladies that are covered. They need to act covered, be visibly in submission under authority with their husbands. And by the way, all of you have seen this. You all know the ladies in the group who you know are not covered. Even if they're married, they're not covered. You see them act very uncovered. Matter of fact, I hate to say it, but almost all of the attacks that this ministry has suffered over the last 20 years has been stimulated by, driven by uncovered women. I don't care if they're married, they acted uncovered because it wasn't their husbands that were doing the problem. The women were driving it because they weren't covered. And I've watched this in glaring physical view. We had this one time, and I've mentioned this story during the afterburn. This is before there were afterburns, but during the Q&A, where our husband stood up to say something. The wife wasn't satisfied. She grabbed the mic and uncovered herself. She stepped out from under his covering because she wasn't satisfied with how he handled it. And embarrassed herself, was called a Jezebel by people on live stream, and then she got mad at me that she got called a Jezebel. I said, well, I didn't call you Jezebel, they did. They saw you, and that's what they saw. What are you mad at me for? I never mentioned the name once. I never called her that or anything. But she got all mad. I said, but you stepped out from under your husband's covering. What do you expect? And so understand that here it's talking about possibly the messengers being the people that might visit, the emissaries that would come. The other possibility is the angels, because in those days there was an understanding or a feeling or belief that angels were always around the assembly and watching, and that if they were to behave poorly, the angels may decide to go somewhere else. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that is in the commentaries you can read, one of the possibilities of what they're talking about, as this is written by Paul from that time, based on the beliefs of that time. Okay? So do I have a good answer for verse 10? No. Well, do I know that he's not creating new Torah? Yes. Now, this is a good lesson, though, for scripture reading and interpretation. You must recognize and accept that you might not always know what something is, but you often can know what it can't be. Does that make sense? Is that fair? So we know this can't be new Torah instruction, even though we don't necessarily know what it is actually saying, okay? So we have to be fair with that.